Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everybody to this fourth webinar of the training program on making the voice of social partners count in UN processes. Great to see you all again. Thank you for joining on time, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you the three speakers today. On this webinar that will focus entirely on South-South and triangular cooperation and the 2030 agenda. We've been having a South-South angle to all of the webinars and to all of the modules that you have found in the eCampus, but this is really the webinar where we go a little bit deeper into aspects of South-South cooperation. Why is it so important? What does it mean exactly? And what are some of the examples and good experiences how South-South cooperation contributes to the 2030 agenda. So I'm happy to have to see here on the screen again Anita Amorim. I don't have to present Anita. She has been a motor behind this program. She's been with us on all of the webinars, either from her own desk or from the airport or from wherever she was. She has been with us. So great to see you again, Anita Amorim, Head of Emerging and Special Partnerships in the ILO, headquarters in Geneva. Anita is the motor in the ILO behind all the work that is done in the ILO on South-South cooperation, many years of experiences in the area, and great to have you again. I'm happy to present Leandro Moraes, Professor Leandro Moraes, professor and researcher at the Sao Paulo State University in Brazil, doctor in economics, with a long trajectory of research and teaching on topics also to do, for instance, with the social solidarity economy, social finance, but also with a lot of experience on South-South and triangular cooperation. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, Professor Leandro Moraes. And thirdly, I'll be presenting to you Fernando Baptista, consultant and expert at the ILO on topics related to South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, social and solidarity economy, local economic development, amongst others. And Fernando Baptista has also been very much involved in the development of the learning modules that you've all found on the electronic campus. So those are our speakers today. As always, let's make it a participatory session. I'm sure our speakers agree with you to write on the chat, or even put up your hand, put up a microphone if you have a question, if you have a comment, so that this can be a South-South learning session in terms of content and in terms of practice. And without that, Anita Amorim, I would hand over to you.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Linda, so much. It's true that we've been together in this journey for in the Spanish-speaking edition, now in the English-speaking edition, and in all places, as you say, in airports, hotel rooms, and wherever we were. So it was great to be always together. It's great also to have Leandro Moraes and Raki Kane. So I'm sure she can be a great commentator for us because she's more knowledgeable than I am UN. But of course, today is UN and South-South, and how that links to SDGs. So I'm sure, some of her comments will help us as well in case she wishes to do so. And we also have Angelica Munoz, who is also a ITC Turin consultant, and also very knowledgeable in the topics of South-South cooperation, skills development. So I'm sure she'll be helping us. And of course, I see now that the majority of our participants, which is a small group of around 10, 15 participants, 15, but are back here. So we can very comfortably start. And I'm not going to take too much time because I know Leandro also has an important presentation. So I'm just going to try to show a little bit the linkages of what we learned yesterday, last week with Ralph, Oh, okay. I have a little bit of problem. I have to show it as a, not in the full slide mode. I hope that doesn't disturb you too much.
Yeah, we see it well, Anita, no problem.
Okay, sorry about that, because it will be tricky to change it at this stage. And so anyway, so we will look a little bit on what he has showed, but for the South-South perspective. So exactly, it's maybe like version 2 of his presentation, but looking at the South aspects. So I just wanted to look like through all the SDGs and look what angles we could find, in terms of South-South cooperation. I'll try to do that, skipping some, because we'll look more essentially at the ones that the ILO is focusing mostly, and also in terms of the COVID pandemic. But I'll kind of navigate you through this SDG. So trying to take not more than 15 minutes as expected. So South-South ending poverty, for example, what would be the linkages of ending poverty of South-South cooperation? I think in terms already, you have to look into what Ralph mentioned the other time, the linkages with, let's say, decent work, with social protection. But then what would be the linkages with the South-South cooperation? We have the questions of the principles of South-South, the social protection agenda that has been supported by countries from the South. So we have the example of Algeria in the Maghreb Arab, and we have the example of Brazil supporting CPLP countries, supporting Timor-Leste, Paraguay. So you can see that in here we're linking, it's a little bit complex, because not only you're trying to think about SDGs, how they link to decent work, but also how they link up to South-South cooperation. But there are many examples, and we're going to look into some of these. The whole question of ending hunger, putting an end to hunger, you also find that some of the South-South expos were devoted to food security. And in particular, the ILO, and this was actually courses that Linda and I run together, had some work on rural development and sustainable tourism, and how this sustainable tourism and cooperatives and solidarity enterprises can actually be feeding the whole purpose of feeding, of eliminating hunger. So that is also done through South-South scholarships, peer learning between the scholars of the South that came to these trainings. On the question of ensuring a healthy life and COVID-19, I thought that COVID-19 was one of the important elements here to start thinking about, because we normally didn't think too much, apart for OSH or social protection. It's not so much in the agenda of the ILO, the whole question of health. But I'm sure if later on my colleague Raki wants to mention some, or even maybe Angelica, and the whole question of skills development, there is this linkage, strong linkage with the health sector, and how, you're training nurses, or, using protective equipment, and how this was important in the question of COVID-19 resilience. I cannot say we're in the aftermath. We're still in the middle of the pandemic. We're like in the 5th wave. Here in Europe, things are getting worse in terms of numbers, but at least there's some lessons learned in terms of protective behavior in the workplace, digital platforms, teleworking, and lots of interesting discussions going on. In terms of education, here again, I think Professor Leandro, who is a professor, I'm sure he can, when he's gonna show his linkages, on the question of South-South cooperation and SSC, he can also mention how he does his professional networking, among his counterparts in universities. And thanks to Leandro, we have actually managed to put together professors and universities of Africa and India together in this South-South cooperation. He has done India-Brazil cooperation, which shows that South-South can be very active in 2030. And of course, the whole VFair Virtual Skills Forum, this is something I'm sure Angelica can later comment if you allow her to give 1 minute, Linda. I think that would be interesting, because she ran together with the skills team the South-South portion of this Virtual Skills Forum. Apart from many interesting things like the G20 project that has a very strong, how can I say, education component. And then I think other platforms like what you do yourself, Linda, in ILO Turin and Sinterfor, is the proof that, the interlinkage of the 4 and 8 is so important. In terms of gender equality, I think some of the important things that ILO does, and I know my colleague Raki has spearheaded some of these, is the question of supporting the EPIC project, Spotlight, combating gender-based violence. And also we have done many trainings now which are targeting gender and vulnerable groups. And this was in the past 2 years because of COVID. On the water and sanitation chapter, normally we don't think too much about that, but the ILO was heading of a water UN task force. And there's actually very interesting experiences from indigenous communities actually sharing water and doing South-South cooperation through this water sharing. And there's actually projects that were funded at the time by Spain under the MDG fund. Now it's new times with SDG, but this project continues at the community level. And then we also noticed the whole question of sanitation because of COVID became so much more important and is something that we didn't give normally attention. The whole question of energy, we also tend not to give too much attention in the ILO, but we had a very big South-South Expo again, in which the ILO brought together some elements of the just transitions, green jobs, and how, whatever is done in terms of energy has to be done in terms of clean energy, sustainable development, non-polluting, and that can actually help the environment. So this is also quite tricky. Of course, then here is our big agenda, which is the 8. I'm not going to enter the details because really we had the full presentation last week, which was fantastic. But just to recall some of the points that where we had a lot of South-South cooperation is the eradication of child labor and forced labor. And I think in the Americas in particular, as we have a group from the Caribbean, I'm sure many of the stakeholders here present are part of the regional initiative to combat child labor. So maybe some of you later on in the debate want to tell us about how that work happens. And there's also some very key elements like youth employment, migration, development-oriented policies for job creation. I mean, really in a very quick nutshell, because that we have entire books devoted to this. So it's really the very quick fix, but I'm sure that at least for the alliances 8.7, you can, the people from the region will relate to. Apart from that, of course, we have supported academies, bricks for South-South expos, knowledge management. So I think these are some elements that are important in 8. In 9, infrastructure and innovation, there's some things going on in terms of digitalization. In 10, when we talk about inequalities between and within countries, I think it's interesting to recall what I had mentioned in the first webinar, which was the Buenos Aires plus 40 action plan. 41 years ago, there was the adoption of a plan of action for TCDC, technical cooperation between developing countries. For those who are old enough to remember that. Well, we were just a couple of years old, right, Linda? But the majority of people here maybe were not born yet, but that was in 78. So 41 years later, there's a kind of a readoption. If you compare the two plans, you see that they're very similar. Maybe the things that came new is the aspect of triangular cooperation, which wasn't so strengthened at the time. So South-South with the support of a northern country, because the context was different at the time, was decolonization, and now it's more, kind of partnership, global partnership. And this also has an appeal in the global partnerships for development cooperation that were OECD DAC driven. So there is some kind of dialogue there. And that in there, we mentioned the whole question of the important thing of having this cooperation among countries, to reduce inequality. So I think that's an important point of 10. On 11, I think here again, the whole question of city-to-city cooperation, which I had mentioned before, was very, very important. And again, Carl had mentioned that in his presentation. So the importance of the agreements with United Cities and local governments. We have done South-South cooperation within cities in the LED forum as well, that Leandro also participated. So you might, he might recall that. So the whole question of localizing the decent work agenda. So not only looking at it from a, centrality perspective. On sustainable consumption and production, again, I would like to refer to the sustainable tourism course, because that had this very important element of rural development and sustainable tourism as a way and a means to have a more sustainable consumption and production that is more environmentally friendly. On the climate change, we have a series of works between the Green Jobs Gain Network page that is worked with interagency mechanism. There's skills development for green entrepreneurships, social protection for climate-induced disasters, and the promotion of fair labor markets and fair transitions. So this is something we work a lot on. The oceans and forests. I think there's a bit less work, but it's all integrated, I think, in the whole question of climate. Peace and justice is a very important one, but I'm not going to repeat it because we had a very brilliant presentation from Elder da Costa, who's the Secretary General of G7+, and I think most of you will recall. But I think it's interesting that the ILO is evolving now from this, what happened in 2014, that was called the Fragile to Fragile Cooperation, now to the what we call the Triple Nexus, looking into peace, development, resilience. So trying to look into this triple nexus, but at the same time think how countries of the South can support and cooperate with each other is another very important element. Partnerships, this is the most, let's say, important one for the South-South cooperation. There is specific targets mentioning South-South, target 17.6. This was again mentioned by our colleague Carl, and it's very, important that there is a very obvious reference, because sometimes we are trying to look for things and say, well, this has an angle or not. So it's actually officially in the partnerships, let's say, part of the whole agenda. And of course, this brings also the whole importance of not only South-South, but triangular cooperation, public-private partnerships, and partnerships with the UN as a whole. I think this, of course, just recalling some of the principles that are very important here: solidarity, national ownership and leadership, mutual benefit, non-conditionality, complementarity, and respect for national sovereignty, and non-interference in domestic affairs. So I'll stop my presentation here. I hope Linda is still around. Otherwise, Linda, are you around?
I am here. Oh, sorry.
Yes, when I saw your camera.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation and making all these important links. We will wait with our commenters, I think, to the end of the presentations, if that is okay with you, Anita Amorim,
Sure.
Angelica Munoz, Raki Kane. Really great to have you on board in that role. But before we get there, let me now give the floor to Leandro Moraes, professor and researcher at Sao Paulo State University. Leandro, please, you have the floor.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Anita and Tim, for the invitation. And I think that you have a good reflection and a good discussion about an important topic that we are dealing here. And I will try to give a contextualization about the moment we are in and the connection between another model, another paradigm of production and consumption, and also the relation with the South-South cooperation and the SDG. I'll put here my presentation. How many time I have, Linda, please?
You have 15 minutes, Leandro.
Okay, thank you. I will try. Let me see here. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes, if you can put it in full screen, that would be better.
Yes. One moment, it's open. Okay. Then, good. Yeah, in training program with a South-South learning approach, I will try to give you, before we start, a current context about the moment we are, because I think that we need to reflect about it. We are in a technological and industrial revolution, number 4, with some trends like Industry 4.0, big data, Internet of Things, impacts. With this evolution, we have a lot of impacts on production, consumption, work, and the relationship between people. But what I would like to say to you, it's that in this century, we are in a context marked by a paradoxical characteristic. For one hand, we have a significant material advance reflected in the current technological wave, like I am show for you. What that mean? That mean advance in economic, technological, and financial aspects. We are including, we can go, if you have money, it's not my case, but if you have money, you can go to Lua, you can go to Mars, you can go to space. This is a product of this revolution, but we still don't have a possibility to give food for everyone in the world. We are not capable of guaranteeing our basic for a large majority of the people in the world. Then we have, in the same time with this revolution, we have an increasing of poverty, inequality, and social exclusion. In other words, despite advances in economic, financial, productive, technical infrastructure, including in information and in communication technology, we still live with alarming levels of multidimensional poverty, growing inequality, and income concentration affect a large portion of the world's population that lacks basic services like education, health, food, housing, overall after the COVID-19. Then in this current, we need to also add the high rates of environmental destruction, product of this model of production and consumption. C, I would like to invite you to read the reports that are conservative reports. That means in the reality, this can be worse than the report from COP26. We have a lot of information there about this, what I try to put for you. And also we have some global mega trends. I was looking for some reports from a lot of international organizations, UN organizations, international consultants, and we have a context within this, I was showed for you, a more demand for food, more demand for energy, expansion of entertainment and tourism, new technologies, urbanization and mega cities, modern infrastructure and competitiveness, aging of the population and intensification of immigration. Then we need to face these mega trends, but not with this model of production and consumption and the relation between the people. And now I think that we are in a moment to make reviews in our mind, to make reviews in this model of production and consumption and the model of work. And we have a guidance, we have a direction. I think that this document, this report, the decade of action, which put the SDG and the recovery post-COVID in the center of the discussion, they have some lights for us to face this reality, to face this context. And we can see 8 sectors that we can think about new works, new projects, new actions in renewable energies, sustainable mobility, inclusion and digital revolution, health, manufacturing industry, bioeconomy, care economy, circular economy, and sustainable tourism. And why I am show this for you? Because I think that we can connect this context. Nowadays, we are in this context, I showed it before, with the mega trends we have and with the SDGs. Because as Anita showed us before, the SDGs from 1 to 17 can contribute to think another model of production, another model of consumption, another model of actions that we need to face the efforts and the trends in this century. And South-South cooperation, betting on strategic and central to give us some directions. Why? Because when we're looking for the constituent elements of SSC, we notice that the main elements of constitution of the South-South cooperation, there are these characteristics. Taking in initiatives in the social, economic, environment, technical, and political realms, manifestation of solidarity, egalitarian partnership based on solidarity, on the sharing of knowledge and experience, and on training and technology transfer, tripartism and the building of consensus and cooperation between the actors, social dialogue, shared interests, emerges out of a socioeconomic demand, respect for autonomy, peculiarities, and priorities at national level, cross-cutting network of actions and objectives, cooperation between trade unions and universities, and strengthening of knowledge and research capacity for interventions in policies and organizational development. Then we have the aspects, the elements to build, to make new actions, to make new model of production and consumption that already exist in this moment in the world, in a lot of parts in the world, which means we have to strengthen the social and solidarity economy. We have to give a force, and we need to put in the central agenda the actions and the projects made by the cooperatives, the associations, the communitary banks of development, and other examples that we have. Because when we're looking for the practical experiences, we can notice a good and harmonic relation between South-South cooperation, local economic development, these organizations in the social and solidarity economy, and the SDGs, harmonic relationships. Why? Because when we look for the local economic development led, we have a participatory development process that fosters alliance between the main public and private stakeholders interested in a territory, allowing the joint implementation of a common development strategy, making use of local resources and competitive advantages in a global environment. One of the key features of this approach is that it brings together local government, the private sector, no-profit organizations, and local communities, encouraging them to make better use of existing resources and local potential. That means that LED aims to improve local economic conditions and therefore aims to achieve a better quality of life. And this with a bottom-up approach, with a bottom-up strategies that values the local, public, and private actors in charge of the investment and associated processes. In the practice, we have some experiences here. And I will try to connect this experience in South-South cooperation with the SDGs. And we know that SDGs are articulated in economic, social, and environment aspects. But we have some experience that has more contact or is more related with some one of these SDGs, but we can to connect them in the South-South perspective, like Mercosul specialized meeting of family agriculture and specialized meeting of Mercosul cooperatives formed by Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil. What is this? This is a space for participatory dialogue between family farmers, organizations, rural institutions, academia, and governments, with the aim of thinking about specific public policies for the family farming sector in Mercosul member countries. It's very important because we know that the topic of the the topic of the food, it's a very, very important topic to discuss overall in this moment after COVID-19. Another example in another part, it's social production of habitat in Latin America also. We have another sector that is another important sector, the construction of popular houses from cooperatives. That is a very interesting experience of change in terms of the kind of construction for cooperative, for the help with the community, with the territories, people. In another part of the world and with other SDGs, we have the Asian Development Outlook 2021, which showed us about the financing, a green and inclusive recovery. Very interesting examples, experiences in Asian countries that they are focusing the necessity of the recovery in this moment, in this year, but with green and inclusive aspects in the energy sector, in the food sector, and others. Another example in practice of the relation between South-South cooperation, SDGs, and other or alternative model of production and consumption is in another important sector we need to deal. We need to think, to reflect, and to build, to create actions. The Renewable Energy Cooperation Program in Africa. It's a very, very interesting project with the South-South cooperation among countries from Africa that work with the climate change. We are in contest, we need to face it, but with actions in socioeconomic inclusion, and also giving opportunities for young people. That's another point we need to reflect here. And with regional and territorial integration in the terms of South-South cooperation. Other examples and other experiences, other practices, I would like to invite you to visit the South-South meeting point. That's a very, very interesting space to connect people around the world and with in Portuguese, in Spanish, in English, in French, that you also can contribute, can share your experience, and you can learn experience for other countries. I am concluding my speech here, but we need also to reflect overall in this space, overall in the South-South perspective, about the challenge we have. Because in some experience, in some organizations of SSE, we have, like I tried to show to you, a lot of potentials, but also we have intrinsic weaknesses. And we need to face, we need to foster the experience. And in this context and in this space, we can change experience, we can change the potentials, we can change the weaknesses we have to try in collective form to face this. And also we need to create or strengthen the ecosystem of projects and experience in South-South cooperation. Need to create quantitative and qualitative instruments, mechanisms to evaluate and monitor experience impacts, SDGs impacts in terms of South-South cooperation. And also we can systematize and disseminating national and regional experience. Why? This is important to extrude the strategy priorities of the cooperation framework based on the common country analysis and the South-South perspective. And we need to expand the participation of this topic in different instances. And for this, I think that we are in a very, very important space to put this question and to discuss these questions, actions, and projects in South-South perspectives. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you, Professor Leandro Moraes, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you for this call for doing things differently, different models of production and consumption, all the linkages that you make, the examples that you give of how the social and solidarity economy can contribute to the SDGs, to the 2030 agenda, but also to these different ways of doing things, right? So excellent. I think it is a good moment to open for questions before we move to the next speaker. Any questions from the floor or comments? And I'm also, of course, inviting our commentators, Angelica Munoz, Eradication, if you can stay with us. And I see Angelica holding up her hand. So thank you, Angelica, and please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you also, Anita and Leandro, for your interventions. I just wanted to highlight some points of the presentation of Anita that I thought were very interesting. We indeed hosted together with the team of Anita and the team of skills in the ILO virtual fair. It was not planned to be virtual, but because of the pandemic, we decided to make it virtual. We were thinking on a fair for Africa, which we, if we can say, quote unquote, thank you to the pandemic, could expand to a global sphere. And it was at the beginning thought to be for discussing skills development issues, but then at the end, we end up discussing a lot of issues, including digitalization and technology tools for learning, for development. And at the end of this event, what we could do, even if it was virtual, we ended up with at least 5 partnerships that we knew that were there, but I know that many other partnerships were made on the side with the chat participants just trying to network with each other. And it just highlights the importance of this type of engagements for the Global South, because as we received the comments from the participants, everybody were looking for what other countries were doing, especially that we were living in the beginning of the pandemic, in which innovative ways of learning were being looked by everybody. So this is just an important example. And another example also of cooperation and SDG 4 especially, we had with Skolkovo School of Management in Moscow, who shared some technology tools also with other countries and in the Central Asia region, but also with Jordan and Vietnam. So this kind of got expanded into many, many dynamics, and it was also enabled by technology. The tools that they were promoting were basically online Tibet institutions, which is something super innovative that also many countries are looking for more ideas. And finally, I just wanted to also share about the pandemic. As I was saying, quote unquote, thank you to the pandemic, many people is also looking at the pandemic as something positive that has happened and that has enabled this innovation that Leandro was also talking about, and push countries and push stakeholders to digitalize their systems. And this has also been enabled by South-South cooperation, because most of the countries in this emergency situation reach out to their neighboring countries, not just for vaccines, but also for technologies, because it was the easiest way, and because it was the only way due to the restrictions in travel and to the other restrictions that we have had. So I just wanted to put that in the table to say that during the COVID-19 pandemic, South-South cooperation was strengthened. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica Munoz. You've met Angelica Munoz before, but she's a technical officer at the Global Program on Skills on Life and Lifelong Learning at the ILO. So thank you for sharing that information and those examples. I'm seeing if there's any comments or questions on the chat. Anything you'd like to bring in before we move to the next presentation? No? All right. Then I give the floor to Fernando Baptista. I already presented you, Fernando Baptista, consultant expert to the ILO on many topics, including South-South collaboration. So please, Fernando Baptista, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's a pleasure to be with you again here. And I'll try to be very brief today. I just would like to show you some aspects of the platforms that we have for South-South cooperation. So I will do two things today. So I am going to show you very quickly the South-South meeting point. That's ILO's platform for South-South and triangular cooperation. And after, I'm going to go through the modules, the self-guided modules that you have been studying over the past days, to basically to point to you what are the most important elements related to South-South cooperation in the modules. Because as I mentioned the first day, the South-South cooperation is a cross-cutting aspect in our modules. So I'm just going to go through them quickly and try to connect the different elements of South-South cooperation that you saw already when you were studying the modules. So for that, I'm going to share my screen now. And just a moment. And I think now you are seeing the South-South meeting point. So this is the, okay, so this is the front page of the South-South meeting point. And here, this is a space where you have a lot of information related to everything that ILO does in the field. So you have news, you have documents, publications. So you can see that Anita is very active and she has been already posting photos of today's session here. So you are going to see that there is, we have also a huge database of videos that show they show interviews with experts. They show their recordings of events, of trainings, and many other situations in which South-South cooperation is relevant for promoting ILO's activities. Here you are going to see the publications. You have a huge list of publications on South-South cooperation in different topics related to the ILO. And also we have thematic subspaces that are spaces where you can specifically, you have information about South-South cooperation in different topics, all of them covering ILO's activities. And this course you are taking is also here, so you can, a different way of accessing the modules is through the thematic spaces, and here you can through this button to access the modules as well. And so, and one last point, we have here also interactive spaces on social media. So you can also enter and join those groups and start interacting with other people who took other courses from the center or who were somehow part of other ILO events and activities related to the South-South cooperation. So that's you can use this space for both to get informed about South-South and triangular cooperation, but also to meet other people and to start exchanging and collaborating with them in different topics. So and now I'm going to move to the modules. So I just to confirm, can you see now this other screen, or it's still stuck on the meeting point?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good, very good. So so basically here you have the links to the 6 modules. So I believe you have also had access and studied all of them. So I will just go very briefly through them, starting in the first module, where I'm going to point to you what are the elements where we have basically in the modules information about South-South cooperation. So here in the first module, it's basically about the 2030 agenda. We have a specific lesson here, this one, that's about the SDG 17 that considers also South-South and triangular cooperation as an important means to achieving the agenda. And here I'm going to have a lot of information related to that, and it also introduces the possible activities and basic concepts. So and after, when we move to the module 2, you are going to see that there is a very important point here on module 2. It's basically about decent work, but we're going to see that here in the second lesson, we have, after the ILO's instruments, you have also an important part related to, I just have to complete this to be able to move further down. I'm doing everything wrong, but now I can move down. So you're going to see here. There we are. One specific part that has good practice of South-South cooperation related to decent work. So here you have very nice, interesting examples of good practice. And now we can move to the third module that's basically about the reform, the UN reform. And here, the main point is that South-South cooperation was considered during the new procedures of the reform as also one important element, one important means to achieve the SDGs. This was reinforced in the UN reform. And this also gets clear. We don't talk much about South-South cooperation here in this module, but there is one very important information that I want to point to you here, that is this. So this instrument, the quadrennial comprehensive policy review of operational activities for development of the United Nations system 2016-2020. So this is the most important tool to review the progress of the 2030 agenda. So and here in the last policy review, again, South-South cooperation was highlighted as an important element. So it was reiterated that the UN development system must increase the support to South-South and triangular cooperation. It's a very important point that shows how South-South cooperation is permeated through the UN reform. And now we move to the module 4 that's specifically about South-South cooperation. And here we're going to have, we're going to go deeper into the theoretical part, concepts, principles, definitions, but also a practical step-by-step session on how to do South-South cooperation in practice. And also we have here also one part that talks more about ILO activities, the support ILO does for the South-South cooperation. Here you have also, you have Anita here that's explaining what her department does. And we have also one part that explains and links the South-South meeting point that I just showed to you. And you have, at the end, you have one session that's specifically related to South-South cooperation opportunities for the workers and employers organization. So this is what you saw in module 4. And after, on modules 5 and 6, in both of them, you have specific chapters that show, here is basically about the cooperation framework. So you have here one specific topic that shows South-South and triangular cooperation in the cooperation framework. So how it can be used specifically for learning from other actors who are also facing or have faced the participation in the cooperation framework, how you can cooperate with them and learn from the South-South through the South-South cooperation framework. And you have basically the same here also for the last module, that's the common country analysis. So here, if you go to this one, you are going to see that there is also one chapter that covers South-South and triangular cooperation in the country common analysis. So as you see, it covers all modules, and it kind of goes from South-South cooperation broadly for achieving the SDGs to the last two ones where we have South-South cooperation as means of increased participation and efficiency of the cooperation framework processes. So I think with that, I showed all elements related to South-South cooperation that are in the self-guided modules. So I give the floor back to Linda, and I'm available to answer any questions or that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fernando Baptista. There's a wealth of information there on the different platforms, and thank you for showing us where the information on South-South cooperation is in the different modules that we have on the electronic campus. So that is very useful. Thanks a lot. And I think with that, I will open for questions and for comments from the floor. And maybe also good to hear from people in the room, their experiences on South-South cooperation, if any, and how they can relate to the 2030 agenda. You are welcome. Thanks for that information, Tatiana. Pleasure. Anita, please go ahead.
I was waiting for participants, but it's just took some. I know Duncan wanted to comment, but I see he didn't raise his hand yet. I just wanted to say something about the region of the Caribbean that I didn't mention. When I mentioned the energy SDG, I said that this one unusual, let's say, SDG for the ILO. However, we started working more often on clean energy, on green jobs. And what was interesting is that Trinidad and Tobago came to the Global South Expo, the Minister of Labor at the time, and presented a little bit how Trinidad was working with the Caribbean through CARICOM on South-South cooperation, energy, and decent work. So there's this another clear linkage for the region. And another element that I wanted to, I know that some people are abroad and not from the region, but in any case, I think it's important to know what the region is saying. And is that India, through the India Fund, there's a fund in the UN Office for South-South Cooperation managed by UNDP, has a $1 million project with the ILO on climate change and green jobs in the Caribbean with a focus in St. Lucia. So just, I think this is another interesting for the region as well. And of course, I wanted to thank both Fernando and Leandro for their presentations. I don't know how many of you have already started looking into the self-learning modules, but if you haven't, I think this is really an appetizer, and it gives people, I think at least me, it makes me feel like revisiting the module. I've been part of the together with Linda and Fernando of the creation process that mostly spearheaded by Fernando, but you know, we also gave lots of inputs and videos and thematic in comments, but it really is, his presentation is enticing for us to look again. And I hope that is inspiring for you, because the idea is really for you who are here, the partners of the ILO, to be able to enter. Is very done in a very user-friendly manner, I feel. So, and it's intuitive as well, so it's not too difficult to navigate. So I think that, and then on Leandro, I think the more time passes, the more passionate he gets. You know, he used to be more formal and he used to talk. And then now he's getting like to be this passionate, he's a professor, huh? Academics are rarely like that. You know, this is starting to sound more like a politician, but I know he's passionate of the topic of South-South cooperation. So it's always a pleasure to hear his presentation. And also he posed some questions that maybe some of you can you know, go in depth into the whole question of digitalization challenge, you know, also solidarity economy, Mercosur, you know, CARICOM, how the interregional cooperation is working and things like that. So I saw there is a question. Thanks for the information, Fernando. Who is the regional coordinator for the Caribbean? I can't remember, this information was already shared. I'm not sure Fernando will know that, maybe Linda. But we are more experts on South-South than in our seas. But
thank you for that question. Different countries in the Caribbean have their own resident coordinator. And actually in the next webinar next week, we will have a speaker from the Resident Coordinator's Office in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Strander Beric, who is the RCO team leader. So then he will familiarize you with the work of the Resident Coordinator's Office. And we will then also speak about the joint sustainable development or the multi-country sustainable development framework, sorry, where that covers not just Trinidad and Tobago, but all of the countries in the Caribbean region. So thank you for that question. Any other questions or comments from
Linda,
South?
maybe
Yes?
I'll jump into that question, because I think what's interesting from that question is that the Caribbean does have something original, which is it has regional CCAs and sometimes regional cooperation frameworks. So I'm not sure there's a regional UNDG office just for the Caribbean, but we know there's regional DCOs, you know. So I think it's still very relevant, you know, to think regionally what processes are, you know, there for the Caribbean. I can mention, of course, on South-South cooperation, and there's a few funds that are targeting the Caribbean, but actually the Caribbean yourselves are actually through CARICOM and other arrangements are promoting South-South cooperation in a very original way. And then there are some agreements with the UN system when it comes to, you know, CARICOM and UN. So that is something to investigate and see how we can deepen the cooperation.
Thank you for that, Anita. Any other questions or comments? No? No? No questions? Angelica, any comments from you or anything you wanted to add? All right.
Sorry,
yes.
my network is very weak. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Angelica.
Okay. Sorry, I don't even see the cameras anymore. No, I think everything is very clear. I mean, I know the context is a little bit in a different region that I have had experience, but as I can remember when I was working, for example, in the Asia Pacific region with Vietnam, every of the stakeholders we were talking to, they would prefer to be given examples of their region because they knew that the region had the same development process, and they wanted to be enabled through through processes that they already know and that they were feeling close to. So I can imagine that for other regions it's the same. And I can just highlight once again the importance of South-South cooperation. And sorry, I took the floor. I think that Duncan wants to say something. So thank you very much for all the examples.
Thank you so much. Angelica. Duncan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I've been listening in, and very interesting in terms of the example. But I wanted also just to mention that since last year and partly this year also, we've been actively engaged in terms of supporting what we call the BRICS Knowledge Series, whereby I think countries from the BRICS countries have also had an opportunity to share ideas in terms of informality and formalization of the informal sector. And I think this also brought a number of people, not only, I mean, the social partners, but also members, I mean, representatives from the government. And the discussion around this also has really supported knowledge exchange among these different countries. So I think these also supported the work on decent work agenda. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Duncan. Any comment to that, Anita, Leandro, Fernando?
Maybe I can comment. I think that just to second what Duncan is saying, I think this BRICS knowledge series is something extremely interesting because maybe I can even actually share my screen. Let me see if I can do that now, because it actually gives some light into the SDG 8. As he said, you know, on the formalization of informal economy, it's not exactly very much enshrined into all the UN processes, but it would be very much under the SDG 17, which is knowledge sharing. So let me, and South-South cooperation, let me try to share again the space that Fernando has showed. So Fernando has showed the space here, and then there is a thematic subspace, which I think I hope you are viewing, that is devoted to the BRICS. And then within this space, of course, you know, you could say this is a little bit far from the Caribbean reality, but, you know, the whole idea is that regional, sub-regional, or inter-regional groupings getting together could be very interesting. So we have a folder here with all the documentation on the formalization of the informal economy that was mentioned by Duncan. And you have a series of videos and official documents, which you can also access through here. Unfortunately, we don't have a, how we call that, a forum anymore, because now with Fernando, we discovered that these forums are paying. So we had some strange publicity coming in, so we had to delete the forum. But you can still chat through any other fora of the South-South meeting point, and you can enter the different social media. There is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn account. And I think there is a little question for us. Maybe you can read it for us, Linda. Over. You're muted.
Thank you, Anita. Yes, I think there's an important point here from Dwayne. He says, or Dwayne, you're also welcome to come in. He recognizes the efforts and the structures aimed at facilitating and implementing the SDGs, but he's particularly concerned with the position or rate of implementation of most of the Caribbean countries, with the exception of Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados. Thank you for that, Dwayne. You want to say a few words about that? If not, I see also Leandro having his hand up. Is that a reaction to what Dwayne is saying?
Yes, I would like to add 2 points. The first one is about the topics which appeared here about digitalization and energy. I think that these are very important topics to give attention, and it's a very important topic to South-South cooperation, to looking for experience in Latin American countries, in African countries, in Asian countries, because I think that this is a very good opportunity to give for the youngers for jobs. And there are a lot of interesting experience in these sectors, which are giving the opportunity for younger in the social and solidarity economy organizations. And also the second point is about the question of Duncan. I think that another point of worry, it's about the informality that we have, including in the organizations of social and solidarity economy. And ILO was a very important effort to discuss about the recommendation 204. And I think that's important to read this recommendation and to think about possibilities to put this on the table and to think the realities of each country to try to put this in a round. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Leandro. And I think, Dwayne, you are right that the rate of implementation of the multi-country sustainable development framework is known to be uneven in the different countries. Also, the level of engagement of workers and employees representatives, but also other parties in that process is known to be uneven. And I think you know better the details on that than we do, but I think it is a very good, important point to bring to the table. Anissa, I see your hand.
No, just to react a little bit to the Dwayne question, and I'm happy with the answer that both you and Leandro gave, but I would also love to hear his voice. I think it's a him, right? Because the questions that and remarks that are very pertinent. I think what's interesting is that there's been a couple of analyses on the SDGs, and if you look at some of them, you're right to say that some of the CARICOM countries are sometimes falling behind in some of the SDGs, but there's also, I mean, on the positive end, I mean, there's a lot of work around the whole climate, the whole package of SDGs, that Carl had mentioned to us on the climate side. There's quite some work on decent work, especially, the CARICOM has been supportive through the Caribbean countries also of the decent work country programs and integrating decent work into the cooperation framework. So there's some specific South-South agreements with FAO on food security as, for the CARICOM. So maybe the ILO should should try to follow if that is felt necessary. And then I think there's a comment about Barbados having less information, and Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. In any case, for Trinidad and Tobago, as I had mentioned, there was a very active participation of the tripartite partners in this Global South-South Expo. It's true that it's a little bit far in time, so it was more than 5 years ago, so maybe some time to reactivate this interest. And at the time we were discussing having a South-South CARICOM agreement with the ILO, and we didn't pursue that at the time. So maybe it's something that we could think about now.
Thank you, Anita. And thank you also, Leslie, for your comments in the chat. Dwayne, yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. I am not really in a position to comment on specifics regarding the implementation of the SDGs and all the framework and structures that have been presented to us now. It's still more or less new to me, learning a lot from this experience, and so just observing a lot as we go on. But the specifics of pertaining to St. Lucia, I'm not really in a position to make any comment on that as yet. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming in. Any other comments, questions at this point? No? Then you have seen in the electronic campus that there are 3 modules that were posted for this week. Now we can see how you're going along in these modules, and we can also see that it's a lot. Huh? Many of you have gone through the modules from last week, but we understand perfectly fine that there is a bit of delay in how you go through the modules of this week. There is that very nice module on South-South cooperation, and we really recommend you to have a look at it. And then there are 2 models that really go a bit more into the details. First of all, of the multi-country sustainable development framework, the process through which that, say, plan for the Caribbean has been made, and the process for its implementation. So have a look at that. And then the last module is about that common country assessment. No? So that is more of the research part that belongs to it, putting all the data together for the Caribbean, for the different countries. So there is also a lot of information in that module on how that process works, what the moments of involvement are. So have a look at these modules, but don't feel rushed. They will still be available next week and a couple of weeks after that. Now on Monday, we will see each other at the same time as always. And as I mentioned there will be a representative from the Resident Coordinator's Office in Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, responsible for Trinidad and Tobago, but also for Aruba, Curaçao, Sint Maarten, so Suriname, yeah. So those residents coordinators office in the Caribbean, they cover a couple of countries and territories, right? So that will be interesting to hear. We will then hear from our own workers and employees representatives in the ILO in the Caribbean, their views on those processes and the engagement of workers and employees representatives in these processes. But also you can ask them questions on the kind of supports that that you would like to have from the ILO in this area. They will be there. And then next week, Monday, we will finish with a nice quiz on the content of this program and the different modules. So that is next week, Monday. Anita, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, no, just to say that I shared the agreement that the ILO has with the CARICOM, which I think is relevant because it includes most countries in the Caribbean. It's 2012 and it's like 10 years old already. So it doesn't include a lot of the current SDG realities and nor too much South-South. Of course, the whole peer learning in South-South is a little bit the background because it's all about cooperation within CARICOM countries. But I still think it's interesting for the next sessions that maybe, you know, if you, now I think through Zoom, you have to actually open it and save it because when we close it, it disappears unless Linda or Giovanni save it in the platform. So I think it's also useful to give a look at that. And basically, I think what you have, which is very original, is that you work already as a sub-regional automatically, you know? So one of the forms of South-South cooperation, because this wasn't so much the purpose of my presentation today, but normally I have a little presentation which says the South-South modalities, South-South and triangular, and then you have sub-modalities. Within the sub-modalities, you have small island and development states cooperation, so SIDS to SIDS cooperation. So in that kind of SIDS to SIDS cooperation, there's lots of cooperation between the Pacific and the Caribbean, currently in all topics, but also in decent work. So there's been exchanges between employers, for example, and workers of the Caribbean on topics like climate change. There's been exchanges on different topics within the SIDS platform. So the Samoa pathway. I think that is an interesting element as well in terms of, you know, when you do your UN processes, you have a very original sub-regional cooperation and sub-region to sub-region. So it's something that is very unique to the Caribbean. So thank you a lot already for that cooperation. And I'm sure you were very modest, Dwayne, for example, on what you're saying, but just your questions show that you have a lot of knowledge, but next time around you can be more assertive and probably when the RC comes, and all these questions are interesting for us to hear. So thank you very much. Back over to you, Linda.
Thank you so much. And I think that brings us to the end of this discussion. I would like to thank again the speakers, Anita Amorim, Fernando Baptista, Leandro Moraes. Thank you for your valuable inputs today. Thank you for the questions and the inputs by the participants from the Caribbean, and good luck with the eCampus if you find a moment, and hope to see you next week, Monday, at the same time as always. Have a great weekend, all of you, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.